The candles on Michael's birthday cake flickered like tiny promises I'd never get to keep. 30 of them, one for each year. I'd watched my son grow from a squirming bundle in my arms to the cold stranger sitting across from me now. The restaurant hummed with other families' conversations, their laughter a stark contrast to the silence stretching between us. I'd chosen Romano's, the Italian place on 5th Street where we used to celebrate everything when he was young. Back when he'd order spaghetti and wear half of it on his shirt, grinning at me with sauce-stained teeth. Now he sat there in his 3-piece suit, checking his phone every 30 seconds, barely touching the osso buco he'd ordered. "Michael," I started, pushing the small wrapped box across the white tablecloth. "Happy birthday, son." He looked at the gift like it might explode. His jaw tightened, that same expression his mother used to make when she was holding back words that would hurt. Sarah had been gone 12 years now, but I saw her in him more and more each day. The good parts and the bitter parts, all twisted together like DNA strands. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, finally putting his phone face down on the table. The gesture felt momentous, like a judge raising a gavel. "Of course. What's on your mind?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What's on my mind? Really? You're going to sit there and pretend everything's fine?" I set down my fork carefully, the metal clicking against the porcelain plate. "I'm not pretending anything, Michael. I know things have been strained between us." Strained. He repeated the word like he was tasting something sour. That's one way to put it. The waiter approached, probably sensing the tension, but Michael waved him away without looking. His eyes stayed locked on mine, and for the first time in years, I saw the little boy who used to climb into my lap after nightmares. Except now, I was the nightmare. "Do you know what I wished for when I blew out my candles?" he asked. I shook my head, though something cold was already creeping up my spine. "The best gift," he said slowly, each word deliberate and sharp, "would be if you disappeared from my life." The restaurant noise faded to a dull roar in my ears. A woman at the next table laughed at something her husband said. A child somewhere was crying. The world kept spinning while mine ground to a halt. "Michael." "No." He held up his hand. "I've spent years in therapy trying to understand you, trying to forgive you. But I can't anymore. I just can't. If this is about the business, it's about everything." His voice cracked, and several diners turned to stare. He lowered it to a harsh whisper. "The business, Mom's death, the lies, all of it. But mostly it's about what you did to Jamie." Jamie. His younger sister's name hung between us like a ghost. She hadn't spoken to either of us in 5 years, living somewhere in Seattle now, as far from Philadelphia as she could get without leaving the country. "I tried to protect both of you," I said weakly. "You tried to control us. There's a difference." He pulled out his wallet, threw $200 on the table. "This covers dinner. Don't contact me again. Don't call, don't write, don't show up at my office. If you see me on the street, cross to the other side. I mean it." He stood up, straightening his tie. For a moment, he hesitated, looking at the wrapped gift still sitting between us. "Keep it," I said quietly. "Or throw it away. It doesn't matter." Something flickered across his face, regret, maybe, or just pity. Then he turned and walked out of Romano's, his footsteps confident and final. I sat there, surrounded by the debris of our last meal together, while the candles on his untouched cake slowly burned themselves out. I drove home on autopilot, the Philadelphia streets blurring past my windshield like watercolors in rain. The gift I'd bought Michael sat on the passenger seat, mocking me with its cheerful silver wrapping. Inside was a watch, a 1952 Omega Seamaster, the same model my father had given me when I turned 30. Family tradition, broken like everything else I'd touched. The house felt larger when I walked in, as if Michael's absence had physically expanded the walls. Every room echoed with phantom conversations, arguments we'd had and reconciliations we'd never achieved. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my study, surrounded by photographs of a family that no longer existed. There was Sarah on our wedding day, radiant in white lace, looking at me like I'd hung the moon. If she could see us now, her family scattered like dandelion seeds in a bitter wind, would she blame me too? The cancer had taken her slowly, 18 months of watching her fade while trying to hold everything else together. Michael had been 18, Jamie just 15. Old enough to remember her healthy, young enough to be destroyed by losing her. I picked up a photo from Michael's college graduation. He stood between Jamie and me, his arms around both of us, that brilliant smile that could light up rooms. When had it started going wrong? Was it when I'd pushed him to join the family construction business instead of pursuing architecture? When I'd bailed him out of that mess with his ex-girlfriend, using connections he never wanted me to use? Or was it earlier, all those baseball games I'd missed, all those promises I'd broken in the name of building something for them to inherit? The bourbon burned, but not enough to cauterize the wound his words had left. Disappeared from my life. Like I was some kind of cancer to be excised. Maybe I was. My phone buzzed. For a wild moment, I thought it might be Michael, taking it back, saying he'd spoken in anger. But it was just Tom Castellano, my business partner, asking about Monday's meeting with the City Planning Commission. I texted back that I'd handle it, and turned the phone off. Let the world spin without me for a while. I climbed the stairs to Michael's old room, perfectly preserved like a shrine to better days. Baseball trophies lined the shelves. Posters of bands I'd never understood covered the walls. His acceptance letter to Penn, framed because I'd been so proud. He'd wanted to go to RISD for architecture, but I'd convinced him that business was more practical. Another choice made for him. Another resentment added to the pile. Jamie's room was next door, though I rarely went in there anymore. It hurt too much. She'd painted the walls purple the summer before Sarah died, and we'd fought about it for weeks. Such a stupid thing to fight about. Now I'd give anything to have her here to paint every wall in the house purple if she wanted. The master bedroom still smelled faintly of Sarah's perfume, though I knew that was impossible after 12 years. Phantom scents, like phantom limbs. I sat on her side of the bed, something I never did, and found myself talking to her. I lost them, Sarah. Both of them. I tried to be strong for them after you left, tried to keep everything together, but I lost them anyway. The house creaked and settled around me, offering no absolution. I thought about Michael's accusations. The business, yes, I'd made decisions he didn't agree with. Some of them were questionable, legally gray. But I'd built something from nothing, turned my father's small contracting company into one of the largest development firms in Pennsylvania. That took sacrifices, compromises. Michael never understood that you sometimes had to play dirty to protect what was yours. And Jamie. God, Jamie. That was the wound that wouldn't heal. She needed help after Sarah died, spiraled into depression and worse. I'd thought tough love was the answer. Military school would give her structure, discipline. Instead, it broke something in her that I didn't know how to fix. She'd left for college and never really came back, each visit shorter than the last until they stopped altogether. The doorbell rang, startling me from my reverie. For a moment, I considered not answering. But habit won, and I made my way downstairs. Tom Castellano stood at my door with a bottle of wine and that expression people wear when they're checking on someone they think might shatter. We'd been partners for 15 years, and he could read me like a blueprint. Figured you might need company, he said. Heard Michael was back in town for his birthday. I let him in, grateful for the distraction. We sat in my study, drinking wine while Tom carefully avoided asking direct questions. He talked about the Morrison project, about his grandson's Little League game, about anything except the empty space where my family used to be. You know, Tom said after his third glass, my old man and I didn't talk for 10 years. Then one day, he had a heart attack. I spent 3 weeks in the ICU with him, and we said everything we should have said years earlier. Sometimes time fixes things you think are permanently broken. And sometimes things are broken beyond repair, I replied. Tom left around midnight, and I wandered the house like a ghost haunting my own life. In my office, I pulled out the Harbor Point files, the project that had started the final deterioration with Michael. He'd discovered the discrepancies in the environmental reports, the bribes to city inspectors, the corners we'd cut that would save us millions but potentially put future residents at risk. This is fraud, Dad, he'd said, standing in this very room 6 months ago. People could get hurt. People need affordable housing, I'd countered. We're providing that. The risks are minimal, and every construction project has them. Minimal risks you're hiding from buyers. From regulators. This isn't business, it's criminal. I'd laughed at him then, called him naive. Told him this was how real business worked, how empires were built. The argument had escalated until he'd stormed out, and our relationship had been on life support ever since. Tonight, he'd finally pulled the plug. The next morning came with brutal indifference. I went to the office because I didn't know what else to do. Maria, my assistant, glanced up as I entered. "Good morning, Mr. Stevenson. Your 9 o'clock with the Morrison Group has been moved to 10. And..." She hesitated. Michael's assistant called. "He's cleared out his office." The words hit like a physical blow. Cleared out? Over the weekend, apparently. Security has the keycard and parking pass. I walked to Michael's former office, and stood in the doorway. The space was surgically empty, not even a paper clip left behind. The ghost rectangles on the walls where his diplomas had hung seemed to mock me. 6 years he'd worked here, and he'd erased every trace of himself in a single weekend. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Mr. Stevenson? This is Amanda Chen from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. We need to discuss some concerns about Stevenson Development's Harbor Point project. Can you come to our field office this afternoon?" The walls started closing in. Michael wouldn't have, but of course he would. He'd warned me 6 months ago that if I didn't come clean myself, he'd have no choice. I'd called his bluff. Except it wasn't a bluff. "I'll have my lawyer contact you," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake inside me. "That's your right, Mr. Stevenson. But I should inform you that we've already spoken with several of your employees. Your cooperation could be beneficial." After she hung up, I sat in Michael's empty chair, staring at the Philadelphia skyline through the windows. My son hadn't just walked away, he'd lit a fuse on his way out. My lawyer, David Brennan, sat across from me in his office, reading through the FBI's preliminary documents with the expression of a surgeon discovering unexpected cancer. "Robert, they have everything. Environmental reports, both versions. Email chains discussing the bribes. Bank records showing the payments. Someone gave them a roadmap to every questionable decision you've made in the last 3 years." "Michael," I said, though it wasn't a question. David looked up. "Your son? He has access to everything." Had access. I corrected myself, remembering his empty office. "He discovered it 6 months ago, told me to come clean or he would." "And you didn't believe him?" "I didn't think he'd destroy his own father." David removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. "From what I'm seeing here, you destroyed yourself." He just handed them the evidence. "The question now is damage control. The FBI is offering a deal, full cooperation, testimony against your contractors who actually did the bribing, and you might avoid prison." Prison. The word echoed in my head. Robert Stevenson, who'd built half of Philadelphia's skyline, might go to prison because he'd cut corners on affordable housing that the city desperately needed. "There's more," David continued. "They're also looking into the Riverside complex from 8 years ago. The one where the balcony collapsed." My blood turned to ice. That was ruled an accident. Structural anomaly. Was it? I didn't answer. Sarah had been dying then, medical bills piling up faster than insurance could cover them. The Riverside project had been hemorrhaging money, and when the contractor suggested using cheaper materials for non-essential structures, I'd agreed. The balcony that collapsed had been deemed non-essential. The 23-year-old woman who'd fallen 4 stories might have disagreed, if she hadn't been in a coma for 3 months afterward. "I need to think," I said, standing up. "Think fast," David advised. "They want an answer by Friday." I drove aimlessly through the city, past buildings I'd created, neighborhoods I'd transformed. Each one now felt like evidence against me. My phone rang. Tom Castellano. "Robert, there are FBI agents at the office. They're seizing computers, files, everything." "What the hell is happening?" "It's over, Tom." "What do you mean over?" "The feds know about Harbor Point. About all of it." Silence then. "How?" I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. My own son had brought down the empire I'd built for him. That night I sat in my empty house, nursing bourbon and staring at a photo of Sarah. What would she think of what I'd become? She'd always been my moral compass, the one who'd remind me that success meant nothing if you lost your soul achieving it. After she died, that compass had spun wildly, and I justified every decision as being for Michael and Jamie's future. The doorbell rang at 11 p.m. I found Jamie standing on my porch. Jamie looked nothing like the girl who'd left 5 years ago. Her purple-streaked hair had grown out to its natural auburn, Sarah's auburn. The rebellion in her eyes had been replaced by something harder, more knowing. She wore a simple black coat over jeans, carrying a battered duffel bag that suggested this wasn't a planned visit. "I heard about Michael," she said without preamble. "And the FBI. Thought you might need someone." I stood there, frozen in the doorway, unable to process that she was real. "Jamie, are you going to invite me in, or should we have this conversation on the porch for the neighbors to hear?" I stepped aside, and she walked past me into the house she'd grown up in. She moved through the rooms slowly, taking in what had changed and what hadn't. In the living room, she stopped at the mantel, picking up a family photo from her high school graduation, the last time we'd all been together and happy. "You kept everything the same," she observed. "I kept hoping you'd come home." She turned to face me, and I saw Sarah so clearly it took my breath away. "This hasn't been home since you sent me away. Jamie, the military school was a prison," she finished. "You sent your grieving 15-year-old daughter to a prison because you couldn't handle my pain on top of your own." The truth of it hit harder than Michael's rejection. I told myself it was for her own good, that structure would help her heal. But really, I just wanted the problem to go away, wanted someone else to fix what I couldn't. "I know," I admitted, surprising us both. "I know I failed you. Failed both of you." She sat on the couch, the same spot where she used to curl up with Sarah to watch movies. "Tell me about the FBI." I explained everything: Harbor Point, the investigation, Michael's probable involvement. She listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. "So Michael finally grew a spine," she said when I finished. "Good for him. You approve of him destroying me?" "I approve of him doing the right thing, even when it cost him everything. That's more than you ever did." The words stung because they were true. "Why are you here, Jamie?" She was quiet for a long moment then. "Because unlike Michael, I can't quite let go. You're still my father, even if you're a deeply flawed one. And because..." She hesitated. "I know what you don't." "What do you mean?" "Mom's death. You think you kept the truth from us, but I know, Dad. I've known for years." My heart stopped. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The experimental treatment in Switzerland. The one that might have given her another year, maybe two. The one you couldn't afford because you'd leveraged everything for the Riverside complex." I sank into the armchair across from her, the weight of 12 years of lies crushing me. "How?" "I found the emails in Mom's account 3 years ago. Her begging you to try, to sell everything if necessary. You convincing her the treatment was a scam, that staying here with us was better. You let her believe she was choosing quality time over quantity, when really you were choosing your business over her life." "Jamie, it was more complicated than..." "No," she cut me off. "It really wasn't. You had a choice, and you chose wrong. And then you sent me away because every time you looked at me, you saw her, and the guilt was eating you alive. Tears I hadn't shed in 12 years finally came. The treatment probably wouldn't have worked." "Probably," Jamie agreed. "But we'll never know, will we? And that's what Michael can't forgive. Not the maybe, but the fact that you took away our chance to try." We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of truth making the air thick and hard to breathe. Finally, Jamie spoke again. "I didn't come here to torture you with this. I came because despite everything, I understand why you did it. You're a builder, Dad. It's who you are. And when Mom got sick, you thought if you could just build something big enough, successful enough, it would somehow fix things. Make her proud. Leave us with something solid. Instead, I lost everything. Not everything. Not yet." She pulled out her phone, showed me a text conversation with Michael. "He's angry, hurt, but he's also torn apart by what he did. He didn't want to destroy you. He wanted you to choose right, just once. It's too late for that. Is it? The FBI wants your cooperation. David Brennan is good, but I know someone better. A lawyer who specializes in turning prosecution witnesses into heroes instead of villains. You come clean about everything, help them nail the really bad actors, and maybe you come out of this with something salvageable." "Why would you help me?" "Because Mom would want me to," she said simply. "And because I've spent 5 years in therapy learning that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I don't forgive you, Dad. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I don't want to watch you burn either. She stood up, heading for the stairs. I'm staying in my old room tonight. Tomorrow, we figure out how to save what's left of your life. Jamie, I called after her. She stopped but didn't turn around. What about Michael? Michael needs time. He needs to see you do the right thing without being forced. Maybe then. She trailed off, then continued up the stairs. That night, I lay awake thinking about Sarah's last months. The hope in her eyes when she'd first mentioned the Swiss treatment. The resignation when I'd convinced her it was impossible. Had she known I was lying? Had she chosen to believe me because the alternative, that I'd picked money over her life, was too horrible to contemplate? The next morning, Jamie was already up, making coffee in the kitchen like she'd never left. She'd found Sarah's old apron, the one with sunflowers that I'd never been able to throw away. I called Alexander Winters, she said, naming a lawyer I'd heard of but never met. She'll see you at noon. But first, we need to go through everything. Every crime, every cover-up, every bribe. She needs the full truth if she's going to save you. Why do you care if I'm saved? She poured 2 cups of coffee, handed me one. Because I've learned something in 5 years of being away. Hating you took up so much space in my life that there wasn't room for anything else. I don't want Michael to make the same mistake. If you go to prison, he'll never forgive himself. If you own up to what you've done and try to make it right, maybe there's a chance for all of us to heal. We spent the morning excavating my sins. The Riverside Complex materials. The Harbor Point bribes. 3 other projects with safety violations covered up. Environmental reports buried. Building inspectors paid off. Each confession felt like pulling out a tooth, painful but necessary. Jesus, Dad, Jamie said at one point. How did you justify all this? One compromise at a time, I admitted. Each one seemed small, necessary. For the business. For the family. For your futures. Our futures? She laughed bitterly. We would have rather grown up poor with a father we could respect than rich with one we couldn't. Alexander Winters was nothing like David Brennan. Where he was cautious and corporate, she was sharp and strategic. She listened to everything, took notes, then laid out a plan. You're looking at potential charges for wire fraud, bribery, conspiracy, and violation of federal safety regulations. Maximum sentence could be 30 years. But if you cooperate fully, testify against your co-conspirators, and show genuine remorse, I can probably get you down to 2 years, maybe 18 months with good behavior. Prison. Even 18 months felt like a lifetime. There's another option. She continued. Full immunity in exchange for taking down the entire network. But that means everyone, contractors, city officials, other developers. You'd be burning every bridge in Philadelphia. I'd never work again. You'd be free. And alive. Some of the people you'd be testifying against play rough. The FBI field office in Philadelphia felt like a tomb made of fluorescent lights and gray carpet. Agent Amanda Chin sat across from me, Alexandra Winters at my side, while a court reporter's fingers flew across her keys, turning my confession into permanent record. Let's start with the Riverside Complex, Chin said, her voice neutral as water. I told them everything. How the contractor, Vincent Moretti, had come to me with a proposition to use substandard steel in what we classified as non-essential structures. How I'd signed off on it to save $3 million. How we'd paid off the building inspector, Carl Hendricks, to look the other way. The balcony collapse? Chin continued. Rebecca Martinez, age 23. 3 months in a coma, permanent spinal damage. You knew the materials were faulty? I knew they were below code. I didn't think. I never imagined someone would get hurt. But after she did, you covered it up. I nodded, the words scraping my throat. We paid her medical bills through a shell company. Set up a trust for her care. Made it all look like anonymous charity. While letting the investigation conclude it was a freak accident. Chin added. Jamie had insisted on being there, sitting in the corner of the room like a witness to my undoing. Every confession seemed to age her, adding weight to her shoulders that shouldn't have been there. Now Harbor Point. Chin moved on. This was fresher, easier to recall and harder to admit. The toxic waste in the soil that we'd hidden. The cancer risk to future residents. The entire neighborhood we were about to poison because cleanup would have cost 20 million. Who else knew? Chen asked. I gave them names. Tom Castellano, though it killed me to do it. City Councilman James Wright. Patricia Morse from the Environmental Protection Office. Each name was a bullet, and I was the gun. Your son, Michael, discovered this when? 6 months ago. And he urged you to come forward? He threatened to do it himself if I didn't. But you didn't believe him? I looked at Jamie then, saw Sarah's eyes judging me. I thought blood was thicker than justice. The interrogation went on for 6 hours. By the end, I'd laid out a corruption network that touched half the construction industry in Philadelphia. Alexandra had negotiated immunity in exchange for my testimony, but I'd be wearing a wire, gathering more evidence, becoming the kind of rat I'd always despised. When we finally left, Jamie drove while I sat in the passenger seat, feeling hollowed out. Mom would be proud, she said quietly. Your mother would be horrified by what I became. No, Jamie corrected. She'd be proud that you finally chose truth over profit. Even if it took losing everything to get there. That night, we sat in the kitchen eating Chinese takeout, the first meal we'd shared in 5 years. It felt almost normal until my phone rang. Tom Castellano. You son of a bitch. He started without preamble. The FBI just seized my computers. My files. They froze my accounts. 30 years of friendship, and you gave them my name? Tom, I had no choice. There's always a choice, Robert. You just never make the right one until it's too late. He hung up. Jamie watched me set down the phone. How many more calls like that will there be? Dozens, probably. I built my life on these relationships, and now I'm burning them all down. You built your life on lies, she corrected. Now you're burning those down. There's a difference. The next morning, Michael's number appeared on my phone. My heart jumped, but when I answered, his voice was cold and professional. I heard you're cooperating with the FBI. Jamie told you? She did. I just wanted you to know that this doesn't change anything between us. You're doing this to save yourself, not because it's right. Michael. I said what I meant at the restaurant. Stay out of my life. He hung up. Jamie found me sitting on the porch, staring at nothing. He'll come around, she said. No, he won't. And he's right. I'm not doing this because it's noble. I'm doing it to avoid prison. Does the reason matter if the result is good? I thought about that. It mattered with your mother. The result would have been the same, she would have died. But the reason I didn't try the treatment mattered. It mattered to her, and it matters to Michael. And to you? It's all that matters now. The wire felt like a scarlet letter against my chest, invisible to everyone but burning my skin with shame. Agent Chen had been clear. I needed to get 3 more developers on tape discussing the kickback scheme for the city contracts. Then my part would be done. The first target was Richard Henley, whose company had partnered with mine on several projects. We met at his country club, the same place where we'd celebrated closing our first joint venture 15 years ago. Robert! He clasped my shoulder, all warmth and false brotherhood. Heard the feds came sniffing around. Nothing to worry about, right? Nothing we can't handle, I said, the lie tasting like copper. But we should discuss our approach to the waterfront project. Make sure our stories align. Richard's eyes sharpened. He led me to a corner table, away from other diners. For the next hour, I led him through a careful dance, getting him to admit to the bribes, the safety violations, the whole corrupt symphony we'd been conducting for years. He gave it all up, trusting me like I was still one of them. We've got to stick together on this, he said as we parted. They can't prove anything if we hold the line. I smiled and shook his hand, knowing I'd just put him in prison. The second meeting was with Patricia Morse from the EPA. We walked through Fairmount Park, discussing how she'd buried environmental reports for 6 projects in exchange for her son's college tuition being mysteriously paid by an anonymous benefactor. You saved my family, Robert, she said, actually tears in her eyes. Brandon never would have gotten through medical school without that help. We take care of our own, I said, hating myself more with each word. The third was the hardest. Vincent Moretti, the contractor from the Riverside complex. We met at a construction site, another of his projects rising from the ground like a concrete accusation. That girl from the balcony. he said unprompted. She's walking again. Did you know that? I didn't. Yeah, saw it in the paper. Some miracle recovery. Makes what we did seem less bad, doesn't it? We still did it, I said, surprised by my own honesty. Vincent looked at me strangely. Getting a conscience in your old age, Robert? Something like that. He laughed. Bit late for that. We are what we are. Men who build things. Sometimes that means breaking a few rules, maybe breaking a few people. But look around. He gestured at the city skyline. We built this. All of it. That matters more than some nobody getting hurt because she leaned too hard on a railing. I got him talking about the current projects, the bribes still flowing, the corners still being cut. He gave me everything the FBI needed, all while standing in a building that would probably hurt someone someday because of our greed. That night, I gave Chin the recordings. We're done now? Your part in gathering evidence is complete. But you'll need to testify when this goes to trial. Multiple trials, probably. Jamie was waiting when I got home, along with someone I didn't expect, Rebecca Martinez, the woman from the balcony collapse. She was in a wheelchair but sitting straight, her eyes clear and fierce. Mr. Stevenson, she said. Jamie reached out to me. Said you were finally telling the truth about what happened. I couldn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it. No, it doesn't. I lost 3 years of my life. My career as a dancer. My fiancé, who couldn't handle the depression I fell into. You took everything from me to save money. I know. Do you? Do you know what it's like to wake up paralyzed, to be told you'll never walk again, and to know it wasn't really an accident? That someone decided your safety was worth less than their profit margin? Each word was a justified knife. I took them all. But, she continued, Jamie also told me you're losing everything now. Your company, your reputation, your family. And that you're helping put away the people who do this to others. It doesn't undo what I did to you. No, Rebecca agreed. But it might prevent the next me. That has to count for something. After she left, Jamie and I sat in silence. Why did you bring her here? I asked. Because you needed to see the real cost of your choices. And because she needed to see you're human, not a monster. Healing works both ways. Michael won't ever heal from this. You don't know that. But I did. Some wounds cut too deep, broke too much trust. Michael had loved me completely once, and I'd betrayed that love for money, for power, for things that seemed so meaningless now. The arrests started on a Tuesday morning like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. I watched from my window as FBI agents led Tom Castellano out of his house in handcuffs. The news vans were already there, vultures who'd gotten tipped off somehow. Tom looked up at my window as they put him in the car. The look he gave me would haunt me forever, not anger, but profound disappointment. By noon, they'd arrested Richard Henley, Patricia Morse, Vincent Moretti, and 6 others. The evening news led with the story. Major corruption ring exposed in Philadelphia construction industry. They didn't name me as the informant, but everyone knew. In our world, there was only one person who knew enough to bring down this many players. My phone became a battlefield of rage. Death threats, promises of lawsuits, voices of men I'd called friends promising to destroy whatever was left of my life. I changed my number, but somehow they found the new one within hours. Alexandra Winters called an emergency meeting. We need to discuss your safety. Some of these people have connections that go beyond legal retaliation. You mean they might try to kill me? It's a possibility we need to consider. The FBI can offer protection, a safe house. I thought about it. Hiding in some anonymous suburb, looking over my shoulder forever. No. I'll face whatever comes. That's noble but stupid. It's the first honest thing I've done in years. I'm not hiding anymore. That night, someone threw a brick through my living room window. Wrapped around it was a photo of Jamie, taken recently, probably that morning. The message was clear. I called Jamie immediately. You need to leave the city. What? Why? I told her about the photo. She was on the next train to New York, where she had friends who could keep her safe. But before she left, she stopped by the house. This is why Michael won't forgive you, she said. Not just what you did, but the ripples. The way your choices put everyone around you in danger. I know. I'll be back for the trial. But Dad, be careful. These people you're taking down, they're not going to go quietly. She hugged me then, the first real embrace we'd shared since before Sarah died. It felt like goodbye. The next morning, I woke to find my car tires slashed and rat spray painted across my garage door. The message was clear, but I had a meeting with the federal prosecutor that couldn't be missed. James Powell was a thin man with the intensity of someone who'd made putting criminals away into a crusade. Your testimony is crucial, Mr. Stevenson. Without it, half these cases fall apart. I understand. Do you? Because I need to know you won't develop cold feet when you're facing your former friends across a courtroom. They stopped being friends when I chose to tell the truth. No, Powell corrected. They stopped being friends when you started breaking the law together. Everything else is just consequence. He laid out the trial schedule. 15 separate trials over 6 months. I would testify in all of them. By the time it was over, I'd have helped put away most of the corrupt developers and city officials in Philadelphia. And then? I asked. Then you tried to build a new life. Somewhere else, probably. Under a new name if necessary. A new life. As if I could just shed this skin and become someone else. But who would I become? I'd been Robert Stevenson, builder and businessman, for so long. Without that, I was nothing but a collection of regrets. That afternoon, an unexpected visitor, Michael's ex-girlfriend, Jennifer, the one whose trouble I'd made disappear years ago. I heard about everything on the news, she said. I wanted you to know. What you did for me back then, even though it was wrong, it saved my life. I was in a bad place, making terrible decisions. The arrest would have ruined my future. It was still corruption. Using influence I shouldn't have had. Maybe. But you did it out of love for Michael, to spare him pain. That has to count for something. Does it? I've been telling myself my motives mattered, but look at the results. Everything I touched turned to poison. Jennifer studied me. Michael called me last week. First time in 3 years. He's struggling, Mr. Stevenson. He did what he thought was right, but it's eating him alive. He shouldn't feel guilty. He's the only one who acted with integrity. Integrity doesn't keep you warm at night. Doesn't fill the hole where your father used to be. After she left, I sat in my empty house thinking about Michael, about the space I'd carved out of his life by being who I was. Could he fill it with something better? Or would it always be a wound, never quite healing? The first trial was Tom Castellano's. I sat in the witness box, my hand on a Bible, swearing to tell the truth while Tom stared at me from the defendant's table. 30 years of friendship reduced to prosecutor's exhibits and sworn testimony. Mr. Stevenson, the prosecutor began, please describe your relationship with the defendant. We were business partners for 15 years. Friends for longer. And during that time, did you and Mr. Castellano engage in bribery of public officials? Yes. The word hung in the courtroom like a gunshot. Tom's wife, Maria, was in the gallery. She was crying silently, her world collapsing with each answer I gave. I detailed every crime, every payoff, every safety violation Tom and I had orchestrated together. His lawyer tried to paint me as a liar, a man saving himself by destroying others, but the evidence was overwhelming. The emails, the recordings, the paper trail we thought we'd been so clever about hiding. You're testifying to save yourself, aren't you? Tom's lawyer pressed. I'm testifying because it's the truth, I replied. And the truth needs to be told, regardless of the cost. Even if that cost is your oldest friend's freedom? I looked at Tom then, really looked at him. Saw the man who'd been best man at my wedding, who'd held me up at Sarah's funeral, who'd built an empire beside me. Especially then, I said. Tom was convicted on all counts. 15 to 20 years. The next trial was Vincent Moretti's. This one was harder because it dealt directly with Rebecca Martinez's injuries. She testified too, describing her months in the hospital, the years of physical therapy, the life she'd lost. When it was my turn, I confirmed every detail of how we'd cut corners, how we'd known the risks and ignored them. The balcony that collapsed, the prosecutor said, showing photos that made the jury gasp. You knew it was built with substandard materials? Yes. You knew it could fail? I knew it didn't meet code. I convinced myself it would hold. But you knew there was a risk? Yes. Vincent's son was in the courtroom. He looked about Michael's age, watching his father's hero image crumble with each word I spoke. I knew that look. Michael had worn it when he'd first discovered what I really was. Vincent got 25 years. The judge called it a callous disregard for human life in pursuit of profit. Between trials, I lived in a strange limbo. The FBI had advised me to vary my routines, stay unpredictable. But I had nowhere to go, no one to see. I spent my days preparing testimony and my nights alone in my empty house, waiting for the next brick through the window or worse. One night, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Dad? Michael's voice was like water in the desert. Michael, are you okay? I should be asking you that. I heard about the threats. I'm fine. Jamie's safe in New York. Silence stretched between us, filled with everything we couldn't say. I watched Tom's trial on the news. He finally said, You looked different. Different how? Smaller. But also, cleaner somehow. Like you'd finally put down something heavy. I put down everything, Michael. The question is whether there's anything left underneath. There has to be, he said quietly. Mom loved you. The real you, not the man you became. That person has to still be in there somewhere. Your mother loved a man who didn't sacrifice her for money. No, she loved a man who made a terrible choice and would have to live with it. She knew, Dad. At the end, she knew about Switzerland. She told me. The world tilted. What? She said you'd chosen the business over her treatment, but that she understood. You were trying to preserve something for Jamie and me. She said love makes us do terrible things sometimes, but it's still love. She never told me she knew. Because she was protecting you. From us, from yourself. She died loving you, Dad, even knowing what you'd done. I wanted you to know that. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there, phone in my hand, crying for the first time since Sarah's funeral. She'd known. She'd known and forgiven me, and I'd spent 12 years hating myself for a secret that wasn't even a secret. 3 months into the trials, I'd testified against 8 former associates. Each testimony was a public execution of a relationship, a shared history turned into evidence for the prosecution. The stress was visible. I'd lost 20 pounds, my hair had gone completely gray, and sleep was a memory from another life. It was a Thursday evening when I heard the knock. I'd learned to be suspicious of unexpected visitors, so I approached the door carefully, peering through the peephole. Michael stood on my porch, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain. I opened the door, afraid to speak, afraid he might disappear if I said the wrong thing. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside, and he entered the house he'd grown up in, the house he'd stormed out of on his birthday 6 months ago. He walked slowly through the rooms, noting the boarded-up window, the security system I'd installed, the general emptiness of a life stripped down to its bones. You look terrible, he said finally. You look good, I replied, and he did. The anger that had twisted his features at our last dinner was gone, replaced by something more complex, sadness, maybe, or understanding. I've been following the trials, he said. Every day, reading the transcripts, watching the news coverage. You're really burning it all down. It needed to burn. He sat in his mother's favorite chair, something he'd never done before. Jennifer came to see me. Told me about that thing from college, how you made it go away. Another corruption. Another abuse of power. Another father trying to protect his son. He looked at me directly. I'm not saying it was right. But I understand it now. The impulse, anyway. Understanding and forgiving are different things. Yeah, they are. He was quiet for a moment. I need to tell you something. About Mom. I sat down across from him, bracing myself. The week before she died, she made me promise something. She said you'd lose yourself after she was gone, that you'd make bad choices trying to hold everything together. She made me promise to save you from yourself if it got too bad. Michael. I broke that promise for 12 years. I watched you become someone she wouldn't recognize, and I did nothing because it was easier to be angry than to intervene. Then I found out about Harbor Point, and I realized if I didn't act, people would die. Just like Rebecca Martinez almost died. So you went to the FBI? I went to you first. Begged you to come clean. You laughed at me, Dad? Said I was naive, that I didn't understand how the world worked. I remembered that conversation, my arrogance, my certainty that I knew better. So yeah, I went to the FBI. But not to destroy you. To save you, like Mom asked. To force you to stop before the body count got higher. You did the right thing. Did I? Tom Castellano's wife had a heart attack during his trial. Stress-induced. Patricia Morse's son had to drop out of medical school because he can't afford it anymore. The ripples of what we did, what I started, they're drowning people. The ripples of what I did, I corrected. You just stopped me from creating more. He stood up, pacing to the window. I came here to ask you something. After the trials, after you've testified against everyone, what then? I don't know. Start over somewhere, I guess. Try to find out who I am without all of this. I want to help. I stared at him. What? I'm not saying we go back to what we were. We can't. But I don't want you to disappear alone into some witness protection program or whatever. Mom wouldn't want that. I don't want that. Michael, you told me to disappear from your life. It was the best gift you could ask for, remember? He turned from the window, and I saw tears on his face. I was wrong. The best gift would be having a father I could respect again. You're becoming that, finally. It's horrible and painful and destroying everything, but you're becoming someone Mom would recognize. I don't deserve. No one deserves anything. He interrupted. We just get what we get and try to make something worthwhile from it. I'm not offering forgiveness, Dad. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm offering presence. To be here while you go through this, to help you figure out what comes next. Why? Because Jamie was right. Hating you was eating me alive. And because I realized something watching these trials. You're not the villain in this story. You're just a man who lost his way when he lost his wife, who made terrible choices trying to hold on to something that was already gone. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it makes you human. And humans deserve a chance to redeem themselves. I stood up, walked to my son, and for the first time in years, he let me embrace him. He was stiff at first, then slowly relaxed, and we stood there in my ruined house, holding on to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. Michael stayed for dinner, Chinese takeout, like old times that weren't really that old but felt like ancient history. We talked carefully, avoiding the minefield topics, finding safe ground in sports and weather and his work at his new firm. I'm designing again, he said, showing me photos on his phone of a community center he was working on. What I always wanted to do. It's beautiful, I said, meaning it. The structure was elegant, functional, with clean lines that reminded me of Sarah's aesthetic sense. I'm using some of your old principles, he admitted. The ones from before, when you cared more about building something lasting than something profitable. I always cared about both. That was the problem. No, the problem was when you started caring about only one. After he left, promising to come back the following week, I found myself in Sarah's study, a room I'd barely entered since her death. Her desk was exactly as she'd left it, down to the reading glasses she'd never gotten to use because her vision went before the rest of her. I opened the drawer where she kept her journals. I'd never read them, feeling like it would be a violation. But tonight I needed her voice, her perspective. The last entry was dated a week before she died. * Robert thinks I don't know about Switzerland. About the treatment he claims we can't afford. I let him believe this because the truth, that he's choosing his empire over my maybe, would destroy him. He's not a bad man, just a lost one. He thinks providing for our children means leaving them wealth. He doesn't understand that what they need is a father they can admire. *****, I'm going to die the way. The treatment probably wouldn't work. But Michael and Jamie will live with his choice forever. They'll discover it someday, children always do, and they'll hate him for it. Not for letting me die, but for taking away their chance to fight for me. ****, I should confront him. Should rage and demand and force him to see. But I'm so tired, and he's so broken already. So I'll die loving him, knowing what he is, hoping that someday he'll become who he could be. Maybe my death will be the catalyst. Maybe losing me will finally show him what really matters. Tell my children I love them. Tell them their father loved them too, in the only way he knew how. Tell them that love isn't always enough, but it's always worth trying to make it enough. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. She'd known everything and said nothing. Protected me even as I failed to protect her. Loved me even as I betrayed that love. The next morning brought a new crisis. The FBI called. Vincent Murray had made a deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he was providing information about crimes I hadn't confessed to. Projects from 20 years ago, when Sarah was still alive, when the children were young. There's a problem, Agent Chen said when I arrived at her office. Murray claims you were involved in the Dock Street collapse of 2008. The Dock Street collapse. 4 workers dead when a retaining wall failed during construction. I'd been a junior partner then, had suspected corners were being cut but hadn't said anything. I wasn't directly involved, I said. But you knew? I suspected. I should have reported it. That makes you an accessory. This is outside your immunity deal, Robert. You could face charges. Alexandra Winters was furious when I told her. You didn't think to mention this? A collapse that killed 4 people? I wasn't sure. I was junior, I didn't have access to all the information. But you suspected and said nothing. Yes. She paced her office, calculating. This could void your entire deal. You could face prosecution for everything, including what you've already testified about. So I could go to prison after all. 20 to life, if they pursue it aggressively. I thought about Michael, about the fragile reconciliation we'd started. Can we make a new deal? Possibly. But the terms will be worse. You might have to serve time, 5 years minimum. 5 years. Michael would be 35 when I got out. I'd miss any grandchildren being born, any chance to rebuild a real relationship. Do it, I said. Whatever it takes to make this right. That evening, Jamie called from New York. I heard about Dock Street. News travels fast. Are you going to prison? Probably. She was quiet for a long moment. Good. Good? You need to pay, Dad. Really pay, not just lose your business and reputation. Those workers had families. They deserve to see justice. You're right. I know I am. But I'll visit you. So will Michael, I think. We won't abandon you. I'd understand if you did. No, you wouldn't. You'd shrivel up and die in there without us. And despite everything, I don't want you dead. I want you redeemed. The new deal took 2 weeks to negotiate. In the end, I pled guilty to 4 counts of negligent homicide for the Dock Street collapse, plus conspiracy charges for the broader corruption network. 7 to 10 years, with possibility of parole in 5. Michael and Jamie both came to the courthouse for my sentencing. They sat together in the gallery, a united front I hadn't seen since their mother's funeral. Behind them sat Rebecca Martinez in her wheelchair, and surprisingly, Tom Castellano's wife Maria. I stood before Judge Harrison, a woman known for her harsh sentences in corruption cases. Mr. Stevenson, she began, you've admitted to a pattern of criminal behavior spanning 2 decades. Your actions resulted in deaths, injuries, and the betrayal of public trust. However, your cooperation has led to the conviction of numerous co-conspirators and likely prevented future casualties. How do you account for this contradiction? I'd prepared a statement, but looking at my children, I abandoned it. Your Honor, I was a man who confused success with worth, who believed that what I built mattered more than how I built it. I told myself I was doing it for my family, but I was really doing it for my ego. My wife died knowing I'd chosen money over her life. My children grew up with a father who taught them that integrity was negotiable. The people I hurt, Rebecca Martinez, the families of the Dock Street workers, they paid for my ambition with their bodies and their lives. I paused, meeting the eyes of the Dock Street families in the gallery. I can't undo what I've done. I can only offer the truth, my testimony against others who would continue these practices, and my genuine remorse. I'm prepared to pay whatever price the court deems just. Judge Harrison studied me for a long moment. Mr. Stevenson, I've presided over many corruption cases. Rarely do I see genuine acknowledgement of harm. Your cooperation, while self-serving initially, has evolved into something more. You've sacrificed relationships, safety, and freedom to expose a culture of corruption that might have continued indefinitely. She looked at the gallery, at my children, at the victims. I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison, with possibility of parole in 5. You'll also pay restitution to your victims, though I understand your assets are largely depleted. This sentence reflects both the severity of your crimes and the value of your cooperation. The gavel came down. I was going to prison. As the bailiff approached with handcuffs, Michael stood up. Dad. I turned to him. I'll take care of the house. Keep it ready for when you come home. Jamie nodded beside him. We'll visit every week. You don't have to. Yes, we do. Jamie interrupted. Family takes care of each other. Even when they don't deserve it. Especially then. The handcuffs were cold against my wrists. As they led me away, I looked back one more time. My children stood together, watching me go. Behind them, Rebecca Martinez raised her hand slightly, not quite a wave, more an acknowledgement. Even Maria Castellano nodded slightly. I'd lost everything, my business, my freedom, my reputation. But in that moment, I realized I'd gained something too. The possibility of redemption. The chance to become someone my children could respect, even if it took years behind bars to complete the transformation. Federal Correctional Institution Otisville was minimum security, but it was still prison. The walls were still real, the freedom still gone. My cellmate was an accountant who'd embezzled $3 million from a children's charity. We didn't talk much. The first visit came 2 weeks after I arrived. Michael and Jamie together, sitting across from me at a plastic table in a room that smelled like disinfectant and despair. You look thin, Jamie said. The food takes getting used to. We brought you books, Michael said, sliding them across. Architecture books. Thought you might want to learn what you should have let me study. It was a peace offering wrapped in gentle mockery. I took it gratefully. They came every Sunday after that. Sometimes together, sometimes separately. Michael talked about his projects, showed me designs on his phone. Jamie told me about her job at a nonprofit in New York, helping kids who'd aged out of foster care. I'm good at it, she said. Understanding kids who feel abandoned. Wonder where I got that experience. The barb stung, but I took it. I took all of it, the anger, the accusations, the long silences where we just sat together, 3 damaged people trying to figure out how to be a family again. 6 months in, I got an unexpected visitor. Rebecca Martinez wheeling herself into the visiting room with a determination that reminded me of Sarah. I wanted you to see, she said, and then she stood up. Slowly, carefully, but she stood. Walked 3 steps to the table and sat down across from me. The doctors call it a miracle, she said. I call it spite. I refuse to let what you did define my limits. It's amazing, I said, and meant it. I'm not here to forgive you, she clarified. But I'm here to tell you that I'm okay. That what you did doesn't own me anymore. I wanted you to know that, to see that people can recover from the worst things done to them. Why tell me? Because your kids visit you. Because despite everything, they're trying to salvage something from the wreckage. That means you're worth something to someone. That means maybe you can be better. After she left, I sat in my cell thinking about redemption, about whether it was possible to truly atone for the kind of harm I'd caused. The prison library became my refuge. I read everything: philosophy, psychology, architecture, urban planning. I started understanding what Michael had tried to tell me years ago about building for communities, not just profit. I began teaching literacy classes to other inmates, discovering I had a talent for explaining complex ideas simply. The warden noticed, expanded my role. Within a year, I was running the prison's educational program, helping men who never finished high school get their GEDs. Look at you, Jamie said during a visit. Finding purpose in prison. Mom would be proud. Your mother always saw who I could be, even when I couldn't. She saw it, Jamie agreed. But you had to lose everything to see it yourself. Year 2 brought an unexpected development. Tom Castellano requested a visit. He was in a different prison but had been transferred temporarily for medical treatment. We sat across from each other, 2 old friends in matching jumpsuits. I hated you, he said without preamble. For months I planned all the ways I'd hurt you when I got out. And now? Now I'm tired. My wife divorced me. My kids won't visit. I've lost everything, and I've had to face that we did this to ourselves. You just forced us to stop. I'm sorry, Tom. For all of it. I know. That's why I'm here. To tell you I forgive you. Not for your sake, but for mine. The anger was eating me alive. We talked for an hour about the old days, the good times before the corruption took hold. When the guards came to take him back, we shook hands. Take care of yourself, Robert. Find a way to make this mean something. 5 years. I served 5 years before parole was granted. The man who walked out of Otisville bore little resemblance to the one who'd walked in. I was leaner, grayer, quieter. The arrogance had been burned away, replaced by something harder earned, humility. Michael was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against a car I didn't recognize. Dad, he said and hugged me. A real hug, not the stiff embraces of the visiting room. Thank you for coming. Where else would I be? The drive home was surreal. Philadelphia looked the same but different, like a familiar song in a different key. We passed buildings I'd built, their shadows long in the afternoon sun. The house was exactly as I'd left it, except cleaner. Michael had maintained it meticulously. Fresh flowers sat on the dining room table, sunflowers, Sarah's favorites. Jamie's coming for dinner, he said. She's bringing someone she wants you to meet. Someone? His name's David. They're engaged. My daughter engaged. Another milestone I'd missed. They arrived at 6, Jamie radiant in a way I hadn't seen since before her mother's death. David was an attorney, working in civil rights. He shook my hand firmly, meeting my eyes. Jamie's told me everything, he said. I respect what you did, coming clean. It took courage. It took my children threatening to abandon me, I corrected. Still, dinner was carefully normal. We talked about the wedding plans, about Michael's promotion to partner at his firm, about anything but the 5 years I'd been gone. After David and Jamie left, Michael and I sat on the porch, watching the city lights. I need to tell you something, he said. I've been in therapy. Working through everything, Mom, you, my own choices. My therapist thinks I should tell you this. I waited. I love you, he said simply. I've been so angry for so long, I forgot that underneath it all, I love you. You're my father. You made terrible choices, hurt people I care about, but you're also the man who taught me to ride a bike, who came to every little league game, who held our family together when Mom was dying. That man was real too. Michael. Let me finish. I forgive you. Not for what you did, but for who you were. A flawed, broken person trying to navigate impossible situations with the wrong tools. I forgive you, and I want to try to build something new. Not what we had before, but something honest. I was crying, not caring that we were on the porch where neighbors could see. I don't deserve. Stop, he interrupted. Stop deciding what you deserve. Let the people who love you make that choice. The next morning, I woke in my own bed for the first time in 5 years. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the laptop Michael had left for me. There was an email from an unexpected sender, the Philadelphia Community Development Corporation. They'd heard about my teaching work in prison, about the architecture and urban planning I'd studied. They wanted to offer me a position, not in development, but in community education. Teaching low-income residents about housing rights, about identifying substandard construction, about protecting themselves from developers like I used to be. The salary was less than I used to spend on lunch, but it felt like a fortune. I called Michael. They want me to teach. I know, he admitted. I might have made some calls. Told them about your work in prison. You did this? You needed purpose, Dad. And the city needs people who understand how the corruption works from the inside. Who better to teach people to protect themselves than someone who used to exploit them? That afternoon, I visited Sarah's grave for the first time since my sentencing. The headstone was clean, fresh flowers in the vase. Michael and Jamie had been maintaining it. I became who you always saw, I told her. It just took losing everything to find him. The kids are okay. They're better than okay. They're extraordinary, despite me. Maybe because of me, in some backwards way. They learned what not to be by watching me, then learned forgiveness by watching me change. The wind rustled the trees, and for a moment, I could almost hear her voice. I knew you would. 3 months later, at Jamie's wedding, I walked her down the aisle. The guests knew who I was, what I'd done. Some whispered, some stared. But Jamie held my arm firmly, proudly even. You sure about this? I whispered as we reached the altar. About David? Absolutely. About you? Getting there. She kissed my cheek before taking David's hand, and I sat next to Michael in the front row. He grabbed my hand, squeezed it. Look at that, he whispered. We're a family again. Broken, glued back together, but whole. The reception was at Romano's, the same restaurant where Michael had told me to disappear from his life 6 years earlier. This time, when he stood to give a toast, he looked directly at me. To second chances, he said, raising his glass. To the people who love us enough to demand we become better. To my mother, who saw the best in all of us. To my sister, who found her way back. And to my father, who lost everything and in doing so, found himself. Later, as the party wound down, I stood outside looking at the Philadelphia skyline. Buildings I'd built stood next to ones I'd never touched, all part of the same city, the same story. Michael joined me. What are you thinking? That your mother was right. Love isn't always enough, but it's always worth trying to make it enough. Is it enough now? I looked at my son, my daughter dancing with her new husband inside, the city I'd helped build and destroy and would now help protect. It's enough, I said. More than enough. We stood there together, father and son, watching the city lights twinkle like stars, like possibilities, like the promise of redemption finally kept. 6 months after my release, I stood in a community center in North Philadelphia, facing a room full of residents who'd come to learn about their housing rights. Some of them recognized me, knew my story. I could see the skepticism, the anger even. My name is Robert Stevenson, I began. I used to be one of the developers who would have tried to exploit you. I built substandard housing, bribed inspectors, and put profit over people's lives. I went to prison for it. Now I'm here to teach you how to protect yourselves from people like I used to be. An older woman in the front row raised her hand. Why should we trust you? You shouldn't, I said honestly. Trust is earned. But you should use me. Use my knowledge, my experience, my understanding of how these crimes work. Turn my sins into your shield. By the end of the session, they were asking questions, taking notes, organizing. I gave them everything, every trick, every scam, every warning sign. It felt like penance, like purpose. Michael and Jamie sometimes came to watch me teach. They sat in the back, proud and still a little sad. We all carried scars from what I'd done, what I'd been. But we carried them together now. One day, after a particularly good session, Jamie approached me. Dad, I'm pregnant. The world stopped, then started again, brighter. You're going to be a grandfather, she continued. And I want my child to know you. The real you, the one you've become. I want them to know that people can change, that redemption is possible. I hugged her, my daughter who'd found her way back to me despite every reason not to. I promise, I said, to be the grandfather I couldn't be as a father. No, she corrected. Be the man you are now. That's enough. That's everything. And so it was. The man who'd wished to disappear from his children's lives had indeed disappeared. In his place stood someone new, someone better. Not perfect, never perfect, but present. Present and trying, every day, to be worthy of the second chance he'd been given. The best gift, it turned out, wasn't disappearing. It was returning as someone worth knowing. When Michael had said those words on his 30th birthday, the best gift would be if you disappeared from my life. He'd been right. The old Robert Stevenson needed to disappear. And he had, taking with him the corruption, the arrogance, the twisted priorities that had poisoned everything he touched. What emerged from that disappearance, from the ashes of everything I'd built and burned, was something unexpected, a father, a teacher, a man who understood that the true measure of success wasn't in buildings that touched the sky, but in relationships that touched the heart. And that, I would tell the community groups, the former inmates I mentored, my grandchildren when they were old enough to understand, is what I told my son when he came back asking for help. That sometimes we have to lose everything to find what really matters. That redemption isn't a destination but a journey we take every day. That the best gift we can give our children isn't wealth or power, but the example of a parent who chose to become better, even when it cost everything. The story always ended the same way, with the truth that had taken me too long to learn: we are not our worst moments. We are what we choose.